So now I call to the podium our chair of the day, Luke Belfield, to take over today's meeting and introduce our guest speaker more fully.
Thank you, Carol. My pleasure to introduce Tony today, the CEO of the Australian Flexible Pavement Association. I've known Tony for some time now. Worked in Victorian government. Tony was the director of Ecologic, and sorry, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Where he did a lot to further Victoria's need and interest in using sustainable and recycled content in our major projects. Great initiative by the Victorian government, and one that was desperately needed because material is a huge input into projects, and using virgin and other materials that are hard to get is extremely wasteful when there's recycled content and others that could be used. Now Tony leads the national peak body representing Australia's flexible pavement sector, and that involves working closely with government, which Tony is obviously well placed to do, industry and stakeholders to promote innovation, sustainability and best practice in the construction and maintenance of our roads. As a lot of us will know, Australia's roads are among our most important pieces of infrastructure. They support our economy, they support our communities, and enable the movement of people and goods across our nation. However, maintaining and improving this network represents significant challenges, as a lot of us in Victoria would know and have seen a lot of commentary on potholes more recently. It's become a bit of an election issue. Not only the other increasing demands of increased traffic volumes, aging infrastructure, funding pressures, sustainability expectations, and the impacts of climate and extreme weather events. So today, Tony will share his insights on these issues and discuss the challenges facing our roads. So please join me in welcoming Tony.
That was great. Thanks, Luke. Can you all hear me okay? That's good. No worries. Okay. It's a real pleasure to be here. I do want to thank Luke for the kind introduction. I also want to thank Peter Dakin, who wrote me into coming along here today, and I'm really glad I have. Just catching up with a few people in chats beforehand, I sort of didn't appreciate just how much this issue means to quite a few people around the place, and how people are invested a little bit in what's going on with our roads. So hopefully today I'll talk a little bit about it from a perspective that I have in where we're at, how we got here. And I'm going to talk a lot about Victoria, obviously, in Victorian roads. I can say that I have never seen the state of our roads being such a politically charged issue. I know we've got an election coming. I know there's been a controversial government over the last few years, and there's been, lots of toing and froing about that side of it. But never before have I actually seen roads being such a high level issue. Now, when I talk about roads, I'm going to talk about road pavements, because let's face it, the Romans built road pavements. They didn't have guardrails, they didn't have speed cameras and all the other stuff, which is all important and valuable to us. But you need to have a structure that gets you from Rome to Gaul, so you can slay them and so on, right? So that's the important part, and that's the bit I want to talk about here, because getting from Rome to Gaul is a fair trip, but in Melbourne, getting from Melbourne to Ballarat's a fair old effort at the moment with the state of our roads, to be quite honest. And I do want to thank Tony here for his song selection. I hadn't thought of giving you a song selection. My daughter demanded that I tell a joke, and I apologise in advance, but it's a pothole type of joke. So a guy's driving on the road, he hits a pothole, he smashes his car, he whacks a whole heap of asphalt out of the road. He hops out, he's in a bit of a daze, he picks up a great big lump of asphalt, and he wanders into town and goes to the first pub, and he goes up there and says to the bartender, give me a beer and one for the road, please. Best I could do. All right. So let's move on now. Look, when I say it's politically charged, I'm going to try to provide some balance here. It'll all be apolitical, and industry associations need to be that way. And I am good at giving balance. I have 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys, girl, boy in that order, 2 right-handers, 2 left-handers. That's balance, right? And so I tell them, my children, I know exactly how to provide balance in the family and how to provide balance in the world. Then I do have to mention to them that they were all an accident, and so that blows all of that out of the water. But today there'll be no accidents, I can assure you. Look, Luke mentioned the fact that what our roads are for, they're for connecting communities and connecting commerce. It's what it's for, right? We actually put the nation together through our roads, and it was never more evident than in this fuel crisis that just occurred. Because the moment the fuel crisis occurred and people thought we're running out of diesel, first thing people were saying was the farmers can't get their food to the plate. And why can't they get their food to the plate? It's because they need the diesel in the trucks, and the trucks go on the roads. And it turned out a stat that I hadn't really thought too much about, but 85% of our goods and services get to us via the roads. So our roads are critical to that sort of connectivity of industry, of commerce, of the food we get on our table here, and on the goods and services that Amazon bring to our doorsteps, and all the rest of it these days. So roads are that critical element of the whole thing. And just a few stats about that. There's about 1.37 million, that's the stat I have, kilometres of road in Australia. About 500,000, 470,000 kilometres of that is sealed road. The rest is dirt road. In Victoria, there's about 100,000 kilometres of road. The Department of Transport and Planning has carriage of about 23,000 kilometres of that road, and that's mostly what we hear about in the papers because they're the arterial roads that go places. Has a written down asset value, for those who are interested in numbers, of around $30 billion. And that asset value, I mean, when you talk about it across all of Australia, the replacement value of our road network is in the trillions of dollars. Elon Musk couldn't pay for the replacement of our road network in Australia. It's a lot. It's a big thing. It's a lot of kilometres. It's a lot of square metres. And when you look at Victoria's numbers, you won't be able to do the maths straight away because I had to have a look at it, but we're quite a densely roaded place because we've got about 20% of the road kilometres, and we're obviously not 20% of the land mass. So we've got quite an interesting challenge here in Victoria at any case, at any stage. There's something like about 60 billion kilometres of road travel done in a year in Victoria. I don't know how you add 60 billion. I don't even know how you contemplate it. So these numbers sort of like, they're there for context, if you like. And when I talk about that asset value, it's by far the largest asset value, written down asset value of anything that DTP, that Vic Roads, that the state government owns. It's 48% of its asset value is in the roads. So, when you've got an asset, you want to look after it, right? And you want to grow it, right? You don't want to consume it and use it. Your obligation, and by the way, their obligation, our obligation is that we will bequeath that road. Those roads are what has facilitated, been a big part of growing the prosperity of this nation and this state over 100 years. When we talk about all that goods and markets and people connecting, that's what it's doing for us. So we need to not consume that asset, but actually maintain and care for it so that we pass it on to future generations as we had it passed on to us. And when we talk about intergenerational wealth, and everyone talks about housing, what have you, well, our public assets are part of that intergenerational wealth that we need to share to those future generations. And if we're not doing that, if we're not maintaining our roads, then we're actually using them up, and somebody else is kicking the can down the road, and someone else is going to have to pay for it. And guess what? They're going to pay a heck of a lot more than what it would cost for us to just maintain that asset. It's a big asset, got to be maintained. I guess that's a little bit of a message there. So these challenges to our roads, and I'm going to talk about the potholes. Everyone says potholes to me. I've had the word potholes spoken to me a few times today, and a few times yesterday and a few times the day before that, and so on. But it's not new in a sense, right? And I mentioned the Romans. Well, in 45 BC, Caesar put an edict out that no ox carts would go on the Roman roads during daytime to avoid the congestion, the noise, and the odour of the time. So, and the people were up in arms about their roads then. So when I hear people in Victoria being up in arms about their roads, it's nice to have that little connection back to 45 BC. Move forward 2,000 years, and the Victorian Auditor General in 2017 gave the state of our roads a good flogging in their report, and talked about the fact that what was then the state government or Vic Roads hadn't met its promises in terms of what it was going to do to maintain a road network. So we were hearing the same things 2,000 years apart in some ways, similar things, different contexts, but 2,000 years apart. Today, there's a public outcry. So again, there's another public outcry, and we've got an outcry about the potholes. We've got an outcry about safety, about access, about cost. And from the industry perspective, from my industry members sitting here in Victoria saying, well, where's the work? Where are the job skills going? They're all leaving us because we're not providing work for our people, as well as the fact that we are embarrassed that we say we maintain these roads and people say, what are you doing? And so, it's a matter of pride for our members to be providing a good amenity to the community. And just one example, and I won't go too far into it, but on the 1st of July, one of my members who maintains the road network was given the network in Western Victoria, northwestern Victoria, to maintain on behalf of the government. Just had to go and put witches hats out on the Calder Freeway at Malmesbury on the way to Bendigo, inward and outward after one rain event because the left-hand lanes were untrafficable, and they didn't even have the authority, the order number from VicRoad, from DTP, to actually go and fix those roads. They just witches hats it off, and it could still be that way. I don't know, but it stayed that way for a number of weeks. Sort of not good, is it? It's not the sort of thing you want to be able to say. And you can accept, and I lived in Queensland, and we were talking about Queensland in 2011, they get enormous events up there. They're called cyclones. They deal with an entirely different environment, but they actually deal with it and accept it and understand it and manage it. And, when we can't deal with what I would say are normal expectations, and we've got a bit of a road ahead of us. So you could say, and I could say, well, this is all just money and politics, right? And we could just finish up here, enjoy our dessert, and be on our way. But we'll try to be a little more nuanced than that today. Hopefully, I'll talk a little bit about some light sort of engineering and a little bit of history in that space there, a little bit about environmental factors, a little bit about willpower, perhaps political willpower, and a little bit about politics, just to sort of wrap it all up, to sort of bring it together, I hope. But I might start by saying, well, how do we make a road in Australia? I was being asked this just before because we were comparing roads in Chicago to roads in Australia, and they're different. And the reason we're different in Australia is that we're a land that's as big as the mainland US, with 30 million people in it, trying to connect from Cairns to Launceston to Hobart to Perth and everywhere in between. So we've got a huge expanse, and we have to somehow or other make us work. And the way, when you get out of the urban environment here and out of the country town cities where you've got asphalt, smooth roads, the way the roads are built in most of rural and regional Australia is that they take local local gravel, local crushed rock, and put a road base down after they've prepared a subgrade. They put a road base down, which they hope, which they plan, which they design, which we design to be able to withstand the loads of the trucks and the cars and all the traffic that goes on it. And then we seal that with a coat of paint, which is called bitumen. And the bitumen there is a seal, right? The operative word is seal. We put some stone across the bitumen because tyres on bitumen isn't a good thing. So the stone is there as a wearing surface to a base to the tyres. And so that's your road, right? Local crushed rock, a painting, a coat of paint of bitumen over it and some stones. And that's got to hold it together. And the main thing that bitumen has to do is seal the road. So that's the next. So I had the joke. Now I've got the riddle, and the riddle is, and I asked my daughter this in London, right? When is a seal not a seal? Right? And she said to me, she wrote back. I was on WhatsApp. She said, when it's a road. And I thought, oh, that was clever. I wasn't expecting that. I taught her well, but actually, for me, when is a seal not a seal? She was exactly right. But it's when it's a Victorian seal on a Victorian road, because it's not a seal. Once the seal is broken, and a seal is broken, I feel like I'm a Knights of old, when the packs are broken with what have you. But once the seal is broken, then it's no longer doing its job. And when the water gets in, I think everybody can attest to the fact that the water is the enemy of the pavement. It gets into that rock, and that crushed rock starts getting saturated. And then when the tyres go across, it's like a pump, because that pavement is not rigid, it's flexible. So you imperceptibly don't see it, but the pavement is moving. So you're getting this pumping action that just dissipates the crushed rock, pops out all the potholes, all the rest, and it's over, right? It's over at that stage. You've gone too far, and you've got a problem. You've got a real problem once that happens. And that's what's been happening. Now, there are other mechanisms why roads fail, but predominantly once the seal is broken. And why does the seal get broken? So bitumen is like the bottom of a barrel of crude oil. Not every crude oil in the world, by the way, is capable of producing bitumen. There are lighter oils and heavier oils, depending on which part of the world you come from. But the heavy oils with the bitumen on the bottom gets turned into what we get, I guess, refined. Everything is separated out. There's somebody here who knows how to do that. Probably got a little, perhaps a little refiner in his backyard or something or other, or I'm not sure, but who knows how to do that. But anyway, we take that bitumen and use it on the roads as a result of all that. So it's really oil. And when you sit it out there out in a highway in the Wimmera or what have you, it's baking in the sun and it's expanding a little bit because it's a liquid, and in the winter it contracts a little bit more, and so it's moving and it's getting moved by the tyres. And after about 10 to 15 years, but we'll say 15 to be generous to it, it says, I'm just about done. I've got old and I'm brittle and I can't flex anymore, and so I crack, and when that allows the water to get in. Now, I don't know, someone was talking about putting squirts of rubber and crack sealing on roads, which we do, right? You see our asphalt roads around here. That's really designed to say, there's a crack there, let's get our maintenance crews out. We need to do that routine maintenance, and we need to do all that sort of stuff. But when you're on rural and regional roads and you let that whole network go that way, then you've created a major problem. And that's sort of like where we're at. And that's really our status right now. So it is about money, right? We needed to do something to treat that seal or to replace that seal or to do something to actually make sure that it does what it's supposed to do, that it is a seal, predominantly a seal. We're not building something inside some magical AI world here. It's the real world. And so we know that things will happen. Some potholes will occur, some cracks will occur, some things will fail. All that sort of stuff happens. We get a flood. You can respond to all that. But when it's network wide and as pervasive as it is now, it says there's a systemic problem. And that systemic problem is really, what I want to talk a little bit about today. So we've got this pothole problem, and we'll call it a pothole problem, but it's much wider than that, because the pothole is the symptom, and we are reacting to that. And so we're hearing the government say we're spending $1 billion to fill potholes. Well, that's a fail, right? There's a big fail mark, right? And then look at us, we're really going to look after these roads and fix them up. We're going to fill these potholes. Well, you're way past the time of actually fixing that road if you've got $1 billion to spend on fixing potholes. You should have some money to fix potholes, because they will occur, right? They're not perfect, as I said, but this is highly reactive. It's a worst first approach, right? Let's wait until it all fails. Then the worst bits we'll go and tackle as if we have to, and do the minimum we have to, and away we go. Actually, good economics, good thinking, and good logic would say, you know what? What you have to do is keep the good roads good and keep the bad roads safe, because if those roads that have failed for the reasons I've just said, those good roads are not far behind, right? So let's look after them so that they don't end up like that. And then, by the way, we've passed a tipping point. So I was talking to someone about the tipping point and there's always a tipping point in anything you do really in life, but in a road, when you reach that point where the water has got in and failed the road, you've hit that tipping point. And I can tell you that the costs to repair that, you have to replace that road, right? You actually have to reconstruct it. And the costs are exponential compared to a seal. So it's more than 10 times, right? It's 10 to 20 times the cost to reseal a road, which you can just come back and do and just reseal it, or you can reconstruct the whole thing. And by the way, when you reconstruct it, you still have to put the seal back on anyway, right? So it all gets done. So you are now in a place where your costs are just going through the roof. In the meantime, we're running around patching up these massive failures. So it's a never-ending vicious circle that only ends up in one bad place. So there's got to be a massive intervention that's going to have to come to make this work, or a long, steady, slow. There's no magic bullet here, right? There's long, steady progress back to recovery for our road network here in Victoria. No question at all about that. It's just where we are. You know, and while the economics would say do it that way, the politics, and just mentioned politics, is say we better tell people we're filling the potholes, because that's what people, that's the headline, right? That's what you see, right? You see the pothole, fix the pothole. So if I've got a toothache, fix the toothache. But if I brushed my teeth and flossed and what have you, well, I probably wouldn't have had it. You know, maybe I would have, I don't know. But really, the analogy I do like to make about that road network in Australia is that it's just like your weatherboard. You've got a weatherboard home, I have, and you've got it painted. You need to repaint your weatherboards periodically. If you don't, and the paint does what the bitumen does and cracks and gets old, the weatherboards get the water on it. Ultimately, some of those weatherboards are going to get saturated and you're replacing weatherboards. And if it's your personal money, you know that the cost of that weatherboard replacement, and then you still got to paint it again, is much more than if you just repainted it when you probably should have. And so whole of life cost gets blown out of the water. By the way, if it costs you 10 times as much to reconstruct a road, it's probably going to cost you 10 times as much in terms of carbon emissions as well, because you've got to bring all the equipment, the materials, you've got to find all that sort of stuff. So, you know, it's just lose-lose all the way. When you add that back to what I said at the start, which was we've got an asset. It is the largest public asset in Australia, right? It's the largest publicly owned asset. When you've got that, you've got to actually look after it. You've got an obligation. We've got an obligation to look after it and pass it on, I think. So that's all good, except there are more challenges, right? And the more challenges are this, there's more traffic. So there's more traffic, that means more loads on the road. By the way, we've got B doubles, B triples, not so much B triples in Victoria, but B doubles, right? We've got extra heavy loads. EVs are heavier. If we get EV trucks, they'll be bloody heavy, right? If it comes, you know, or when it comes. So those things put extra load on the pavement. And if it's a flexible pavement and you're bouncing on it all the time with the truck, and the rougher the road is, the more it bounces on it, then you're going to break that eventually. So it's going to fail earlier. So you've got reconstruction costs earlier. So the 15 years becomes 10 years or whatever the case may be. So you've got that. And we've also got this thing called the weather and weather events. And people are telling us that our weather events are becoming, and our rain events are becoming more common, but perhaps more intense when they do come. Some people call that climate change. It doesn't matter to me. It just says we're getting more of this weather and we're getting more wild weather, and it's attacking a road that isn't being maintained properly in the first place. And that road's getting heavier loads, and it was built to a standard which has been traditionally held us really in great stead. It's a really cheap, cost-effective pavement. It's a fantastic pavement globally. We couldn't have done a better job of engineering, whoever our forefathers were, of engineering a road empirically to create what they've created. And somehow or other, we're starting to lose that now. And so the question now is, though, with weather change and with more loads going and with what we've got, can we reconstruct the road back the way it was, or do we have to reconstruct it better? And that's sort of like another challenge for our road. And reconstructing it better is important to think about, and I think we do, right? That's my view of it. And so the way we do that is we might be able to add, and I'll use bitumen or cement into the road base and reuse the road base, and don't throw it away, reuse it, strengthen it. If you put bitumen in there, it will want to repel water, which is pretty important as well. So I think some of the key solutions then are to think about the road as a linear quarry, right? Reuse it, right? You can use it, pick it up. Asphalt's the most recyclable product in the world in construction materials, right? It's 100% recyclable. So you can do that. I do want to talk then a little bit about money. And the reason I want to talk about money is that I've just discussed all of this here. What we do in Victoria is in 1993, Vic Roads said, we're going to really proactively maintain this road network because we know how important it is. I could read from the minister's thing there, and we didn't do it, right? But we also said we're going to reseal 7% of the network. Guess what? 7% of the network will give you 15 years life, right? Because every 15 years it'll take 15 years to get around the whole network. AFPA has released, we've released a paper, the white paper that says reseal 7% of your network. You must do that, right, to start with. That's just a starting point. We actually have to do more to catch up, but that's what we need to do. New Zealand Transport Authority 2024 has released its policy. It says we're resealing 9% of the network and we're rehabilitating 2% of it. I saw the CEO of NZTA recently. Last year, they'd managed 7.5% and 1.75%. Pretty good, because what Victoria is managing since COVID is 1%, 1.2%, 1.4%. That's going to take you 70 to 100 years to cover the network. Those roads aren't going to be, we won't be around to know, but they won't be there, right? So, we're way off the mark. And in fact, that 7% target that Vic Roads set in 1993, they've never met it. The highest they got was during COVID, when there was a bit of stimulus money going in to try to keep things going, and they got to about 5%. Which would be better than what we're doing today at 1%. It's hopeless. And then we're spending $1 billion on potholes to go and to spend $1 billion next year on more potholes. So I think there's a KPI target, and rather than dollars spent, we should be talking about how much of the network are we actually looking after as we go. I think that's really important. And in terms of the money, this is my Yarra Valley water bill. Why am I showing you this? Because the Yarra Valley water bill is a utility, right? The water is a utility that comes down a pipe towards me. The roads are a utility for public use as well. Yarra Valley, actually, I know that I pay Yarra Valley $22.30 every quarter to maintain the water supply system, and $127.37 to maintain the sewage system. There's my money, and I know where it goes, right? And by the way, I don't want any potholes in my water system or my sewage system, right? So they do it, right? Because they get paid for it, and I see where my money goes. I pay fuel excise every time I fill up the Bowser, no EVs for me. And I don't know where that money goes. I don't know what the transparency of that money is, where it's being used, how it's being used. Nobody does. It goes into consolidated revenue. You know what that is? that's the treasurer's piggy bank, so for whatever he wants to do with it, I don't know. And so where is our model for funding of the road? So when we say there's not enough money, I say your KPI targets, you have an obligation for this generation, for future generations to look after that road, do 7% resealing, one KPI. There'll be a number of others, right? Let's do that as a starting point. Let's clear the drains, get the water away. Let's try that and see how we go. And by the way, find a funding model that bloody well works and that I can have as a transparent, real way to go. So in summary, it's all roses from here, right? We're going well. We're going to have a great, we're going to rebuild a fantastic network. I could talk for hours about it, but I'm happy to take some questions as well, of course.
Davidson. I thought it might be worth running a little straw poll. We talked about all the costs involved, and they're vast. Didn't talk about the cost of people replacing tyres on their vehicles. A little straw poll. How many people have damaged a tyre on a pothole and a windscreen? And a windscreen. Oh, there you are. And that's another expense that you can make.
No, and it's a great one, because here's the thing about when I said I could follow my water bill, that company follows my water bill. The roads are owned by everyone and therefore they're owned by no one. And that's the problem. But they are owned by the government, right? And the government is invisible in some ways, right? So we don't have that direct ownership model to be able to say, I'm fixing this. And so I don't care as the government, my money, I've got a little policy that says unless it costs you $2,000 or more, I'm not interested in your blown tire or your tire rim or what have you. Doesn't make sense. The water company, when they put a pothole in my water line, they're out to fix it, right? Because they know that I'm paying them, right? So there's a big difference here. And that's part of the disparity of a public asset being treated, like I said, owned by everybody, owned by no one. Because of that,
Yeah. Thank you for this tough. You're very likely to address it, but it's a case of do you survive in the country?
Sorry?
The Western Highway. Do you survive a country? Mentioned the Western Highway. My wife and I went up there the other Sunday to visit her parents. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Tony one for two since we did previously. We went to Cobram the other day. The funeral, the road around the Gamby bypass, which is not an old road, unbelievable. On each of those occasions, cars parked, and with our plastic was, we drove to Lisbon and back. So our July was busy, pretty selling that area of the new highway. 3 cars on our way up, one being loaded in a truck. On our way back, similar situation. Once you get in the New South Wales, it's admittedly, it's concrete. My question is particularly related to the energy and what you know about peninsulas. Why did the road peel off? Potholes are one thing. But why do the sections of the road actually peel off? Where does that vision go?
Yeah. So firstly, in terms of concrete roads, New South Wales do concrete roads on some of their freeways. Some of those roads are now, obviously I'm an asphalt man, so but it's a fair question, and other parts of the world, Europe and US in particular, do a lot of concrete roads and asphalt roads. I think the question to do with concrete right now in New South Wales is that they have sections in Marulan and other places up north that are due for replacement. They have to replace them with asphalt because they can't stop the traffic now that it's an open road, and the asphalt will get done overnight. The concrete takes weeks or what have you to do. More importantly, for our economy, concrete is very expensive to build to build those deep concrete pavements relative to the asphalt bitumen type pavements that I spoke about. So there's a balance there somewhere. It's all about discounted cash flows and what have you, and people come up with answers to say whole of life costs and what have you, along with the carbon question. So, that argument will go backwards and forwards, but it appears that New South Wales is leaning back towards asphalt as its preferred option. I don't know where that'll end up. In terms of failures, so Peninsula Link, I was the general manager of Boral Asphalt when we won the subcontract package to lay the asphalt and the bitumen seal on Peninsula Link. And the first half of Peninsula Link is asphalt. And then as you get around that bend and head towards the Mornington Peninsula, it turns into a spray seal. We just went to them at the time and said, why are you doing this? Really, this is not the right design and right solution. And it was as simple as a bureaucratic process of that's the boundary. And the standard design towards Melbourne is this heavy duty pavement. The standard design in regional Victoria is this light thing. But this road has got the same vehicles coming around it. You know, what the? How about a little common sense here? But what is that's what's on the plan. That's what I do. That's what the consultants did because they said that's the standard design. This is where it's good to have some engineers in the room and people who think and what have you. It was the wrong design. It was also built when the drought broke. So the northern part of East Link was built in a drought. Beautiful job. Poor old Abbey Group got Peninsula Link and the drought broke, or La Nina or whoever, and they just built that thing in a flood.
Clearly, roads are one of our biggest assets. And I think, as Kurt talked today, one of the problems is that the model of maintenance needs to be a lifelong maintenance model, which you clearly don't have right. And we have a very fractured system of who owns the roads and that management of that infrastructure. But when you go and look at countries like Holland and Switzerland, where talking about the environment and everything from sleet and snow and ice to heat, lots more cars than we do, and they're doing it really well. Their roads are fantastic. How do we learn from that so we can change the model of what we do so we deterioration? Rather than fixing potholes, we do the prevention.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Next October, we will have our international conference, and we will be bringing, and we do bring the Dutch and others here. They'll be on the Gold Coast. Come along and come to the conference, and then stay for the rugby if you like, because it'll be Rugby World Cup time as well, right in the middle of it. But we do a fair bit of liaison with a thing called EAPA, which is the European Asphalt Pavement Association, and we share these sorts of technologies. We share the sort of goals, we share the net zero goals and what have you with them. We're also part of a thing called the Global Asphalt Pavement Alliance, which includes a sister organisation in the US, South Africa, Japan. In fact, one of our people is going to Japan shortly. So we're doing a lot of knowledge sharing. We run international knowledge tours as well. So we've got some sort of collaboration going there. What we have got is a very different environment and a very different, you talked about what they have, and they have their own challenges, and they do it a bit differently as a result. What we have, and we really do have to make do with the fact that 30 million people in a land where, from Perth to Melbourne, that's longer than the circumference of the moon. It's a long way. It's a big nation. So we've got to make that money stretch that far and divide it by 30 million, not by anything else. So we've got some challenges, but having said that, there's no doubt, right, the way that, and it might even be the funding model that we're going to have a look at, because right now, I'm happier paying my Yarra Valley water bill because at least I know what I'm getting for it than what I do when I pay my fuel excise, which I now know how much it is because they took it off and now they put it back so I can actually see it. But I don't know where it's going. So that's a really good question. And I might take that further myself because I think it's such a worthwhile question. Thank you.
Well
Yeah.
On behalf of Rotary, I'd like to say thank you.
Oh,
yeah. And also just say 30 billion is an interesting number. That's about the cost of North East Link.
Yeah.
And also on the issue of funding, I know when I worked in Premier and Cabinet, budget would always come up. Look at the business case for road maintenance, and there'd always be a case of, why do they need that much money? What are the department doing? We don't understand this. We'll give them a year of funding and they can come back and give more reasons why they need more funding. So I think, funding,
Yeah.
Lobby government for transparent funding.
I can say, you know, we've been talking a lot to both sides of government at the moment because we think whoever gets in, they'll be making commitments about roads. So I'm hopeful that something will come out of what we've got.
Yeah,
And I do want to say thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate the questions too.
So in just closing the meeting, I'd just like to thank visitors and guests for attending. Also like to thank Tony Bettini for his reflection, MC Rosemary Nixon, and our lunch and reception teams. So just a reminder that next week we meet here at number 35 with our guest speaker will be District Governor for 26-27, Graham Hope. Look to your bulletin and our website for information. We hope you can join us.